All right, thanks for checking out Transcriptive. I'm Jim Tierney, and this is the Transcriptive Introduction tutorial. We're going to go over the basics of Transcriptive and just talk about the various different functions and how to use it. So let's dive into it. As you can see, here's Transcriptive as a panel. The way you get to it is by going up to the Window menu and going to Extensions and going to Transcriptive. It is not a normal plugin. You're not going to find it in the video effects panel, as you would with, say, something like Beauty Box or Flicker Free or our traditional visual effects plugins. Again, you're going to find it under Window and Extensions, and then it's going to pop up as a panel, and you can drop it into any area of the UI that you want. So once we have that, there's a couple ways to get the transcript to begin with. We can select a sequence that we have and click on Transcribe With. And the first thing you want to do before you do that is go to Speech Engine Setup. And this is where you're going to set up Watson or Speechmatics, which are the two speech engines that you can use. They have different pros and cons. Watson is a little bit cheaper. You get 1,000 minutes for free, but it's less accurate. Still pretty good, but it's less accurate than Speechmatics. And Speechmatics is 7 cents a minute or so, and it's more accurate than Watson. You will usually give you about a 95% accuracy rate on good audio. So Speechmatics is usually what we use, but if you're on a budget or have a lot of stuff that needs to be transcribed, Watson can be a better choice. But Watson is a little bit more difficult to set up, so make sure you go through the directions with Watson. We have a different tutorial on that. Speechmatics is very easy to set up, and you just enter in your credentials here, and you're good to go. And then once you do that, it will show up under the Transcribe With, and we can select the engine we want to use, click on Speechmatics. You can see that it'll tell you how many minutes are going to be used, what service you're using. You have a couple different options for, do you want to identify questions? Do you want to include speakers? And what language you want to use. And so as you can see, there are quite a few languages. Identify questions is useful if you have like an interview where you know there are going to be a bunch of questions. In this case, Transcriptive will try to identify questions and put a question mark after it instead of a period to try and save you a little bit of typing. So once we figure out what we want here, in this case, I'm going to turn off identify questions because it's just a single person talking, and I don't need to include speakers. And I'll click continue. It'll encode the file, upload it to Speechmatics or whatever service you choose. Speechmatics will then transcribe that, send us back a text file, and then Transcriptive will receive that and display it in this window, as you can see. Now that's great if you have a sequence and you're transcribing the sequence. But what if we have just a bunch of clips and we want to transcribe those without them being in a sequence? Well, that's super easy. You just come up here and there are different ways to batch process a whole bunch of clips. There are other tutorials that are going over each of these, so I'm not going to go over the details of all of them. But in this case, I'm going to select Batch Project. And what Batch Project does is it looks for a folder in your project. In this case, there has to be a folder called Transcriptive. So you create that folder, you name it Transcriptive, and then any clips you want to have transcribed, you put into that folder. And then when you click on Batch Project, it'll go ahead and encode all of those files, upload them to the speech service, and then bring them back. And then once we get the transcription back, we load that into the speech analysis section of the metadata for that clip. And you can see up here in the status window what clip is being transcribed. And so this window right here will give you a lot of info about what's happening within Transcriptive. What it's transcribing, if you have any error messages, it'll show up here. So this is a very important thing to pay attention to. Okay, and once that's done, we can click on metadata. And when we click on these clips, you'll see that all the transcript will show up in the speech analysis metadata field. So let's click on Dharma Jean here. And you can see we have the entire transcript in there. And the great thing about this is if we now come to our source window, we can search for this. You can come in here and search for, say, the word experience, and we'll jump right to it. We can click on that, and it'll take us to that portion of the clip. And same with our Kevin clip here. And we can search for, say, American. See where that shows up. We'll click on the first instant of that. We'll maybe set an in and out point on the last one. And we'll set the out point there. And then now if we create a new sequence, we can drag that clip in and we're good to go. We've used the speech analysis field to search and find it in the source panel and use that to create the clip that we want to. So using the metadata panel and the speech analysis is a great way of searching your clips to find exactly what you're looking for if you know what was said, but you're not sure where it was said. So that's great. We can then load up, say, this clip, grab that, pull it in here, and then we'll go ahead and transcribe this sequence. We'll jump back to transcriptive. And now I have multiple clips in here. And in this case, it'll use the transcript that we already got that's in the speech analysis to generate it for this clip. But for this clip, it's going to have to go out to Speechmatics and transcribe that. And we'll click continue. And now we wait for Speechmatics to get back to us. All right, so once Transcriptive transcribes this, once we get the transcription back from Speechmatics, the way Transcriptive works, you can come in here and start clicking on the transcript, and this will jump to wherever the word is that you click on. We know the time code for each word, so it's very easy to figure out where we're at and just jump around. So if you just want to play back, you can click on the space bar, and you can see that the words get tracked as the audio is spoken. And so this is tracking mode. You basically just have a highlight that's going through the text. You can do stuff like delete words, but you can't really do much editing. But if you want to edit, you actually have to hit the Enter key, and that will take you into editing mode, where we can start making changes to the text. And at this point, we're basically in a word processor for doing transcriptions. And we can click around here, we can make changes, we can delete stuff. It's a very easy way of editing transcripts. There are lots of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use. When you're in tracking mode, actually you can use keyboard shortcuts to add things like commas or parentheses or periods or all sorts of things. And so there's a PDF that is available that will show you all the different keyboard shortcuts to really make things fast. The way we designed it is that you shouldn't have to take your hands off the keyboard while you're editing. You shouldn't have to use a mouse. It should be very easy just to hit the space bar, start moving through it, and then use the keyboard to make all the edits that you need to. So it makes for a very fast workflow. So again, when you're in tracking mode, you can use the space bar to move around. You can use keyboard shortcuts, the arrow keys to move around. You can add punctuation, but you can't do any actual editing. If you want to do edit, you have to hit the return key, and that'll take you into edit mode. So that's great. One thing that's really important is if you switch between sequences, you need to load the transcript for that sequence. Transcriptive doesn't know automatically that you've switched sequences. And so what you can do is come up here and load transcripts, and that will load in the transcript for that sequence. And now you can start playing that back and making edits to this transcript. And if I want to switch back to this sequence, again, I have to click on it and then select Loads Transcripts. So that's great. That's an important part of the workflow. Once we have our transcript edited, we can now export it. You can export it as plain text. We can export it as different types of markers. So we can click on Sequence Markers, export it. And now if we go to the Markers panel, you can see the entire transcript is in markers, which makes it very easy to search. And so if you're sharing projects with somebody else, this makes it very easy to include the transcript into the project and search it. So again, if you know what was said, but you don't know where it was said, this is a very fast and efficient way of moving around the sequence and finding those areas. And of course, you can export to different subtitle and captioning formats: SRT, STL, VTT, SMPTE, XML will be in here very shortly. And you can also export it to speech analysis. One last thing that's very interesting and useful is sometimes the speech services will come back as having failed. However, the file will have gotten uploaded to, say, Speechmatics. It'll transcribe it, but then for some reason, either Transcriptive doesn't get the file or there's some hiccup that occurs and it doesn't get loaded. So you can go to Import Transcripts and you can see all of the Speechmatics jobs, and you can manually load the transcript. And that'll reload the transcript from Speechmatics. So that's the basics of it. Give it a shot and try it out. Definitely let us know how it's working. It's definitely in beta right now, but we'd love to get your feedback. And of course, there are other tutorials on the website. It should be in the email that you received as part of the beta program. So thanks for joining me, and thanks for checking out Transcriptive.